to the tutorial. This one's going to cover Introduction to Data. For my AP Statistics classes, and for those of you interested in that topic, this is really a beginning to looking at data. As a statistician, one of your main jobs is to make sense of the things that you see, to make sense, to make patterns, to be able to organize data in such a way that you can share that and explain that to someone else. So you can see here in that first chart, you've got a lot of data, seemingly random data listed in a grid. See what looks like prices. You can see here prices here. Looks like locations, Canada. You've got Orange County. You've got Kansas, Illinois, Boston. We have things that may be serial numbers or item numbers. We have things that may be other identifiers. This one looks like mammals. Maybe that's maybe a book, topic. You've got a lot of different things here that we're not really sure what they are simply because of the way that it's organized. One of the best things we can do is to put the data into a chart or into a grid or some other display that allows us to make conclusions or comparisons for future reference. One of the first things we can do with data is ask a few questions about it. Who, what, when, where, why, and how are one of the ways that we can gather this information and at least begin to make sense of it. I want to take the next few minutes and explain exactly how we look at each one of these questions, because not all of them are intuitive. Take, for example, the who. When we ask the question, who is the data, or who does the data describe, that who, even though in language we automatically want to think of that as an individual, a person, an entity of some type. It's not necessarily that. It could be an inanimate object. It could be items that you're looking to purchase or things like that. So the question you really want to ask is, who are the data about? So we can look up there at the top, and it would give us a little bit of instructions here. It says Amazon might collect. So this is apparently something about an order from Amazon. So the who would be, who did we collect the data about? So this is someone's purchases from Amazon. So we're not really sure who that is. We would assume that an individual or a company would have purchased these items from Amazon. So our who in this case would be the purchaser, or maybe possible several people that are purchasing, or companies purchasing these items. When we look at what and why, the what question is always going to be, what am I collecting? What is the information? These, what we call our variables, these would change from individual to individual. Okay, the what can be measured, or what am I counting? If it's categorical, we would count them. If it's quantitative, we could be measuring them in ways. And that can take a lot of different formats. Okay, be careful. This is one of those places where you want to be able to classify your what variables, or your whatever the answer is to the what question needs to be able to be classified as a categorical or a quantitative variable. Okay, quantitative values are always going to have units. Categorical variables won't have a unit, but it will simply be something that is counted. For example, we could talk about the location of the purchaser, if they were from the United States, or if they were from Canada, or if they were from England or China, or anything. Any of those would be categorical. You could find out how many people actually ordered from those particular countries. Why is a lot more complicated. Depending on your information, the article that's written, the whatever your information, wherever it comes from, why may not be explicitly stated, but usually we can determine the why intuitively, and you may have to make that jump in some cases. Okay, but a lot of these questions may not be able to be answered, and so when it comes up is, well, it's not stated in the problem. We don't know why, or we don't know where, or we may not know exactly when the information was collected. And in those cases, you'll simply write not stated or not given. When, where, and how. Now these are a lot more straightforward. When was the data collected? Where was the data collected, and how was it collected? Popular ways of collecting data could be a survey, it could be an observational study, which is a lot like a survey, it could be an experiment. Any number of ways that can fit into those kinds of patterns. When was the data collected and where was it collected? They were really straightforward. In this case, where was the data collected? Well, it was collected from Amazon, and it may be, you could talk about the data was collected on Amazon's website. If it was something specific, a different type of study, and something went to New Mexico and you collected data from there, you collected data from New York, those are going to have two completely separate, different meanings. Okay, one example of how these can interact is area codes. If you look at how area codes were originally designed, back in the early 1900s, we had area codes that indicated sizes of populations. The larger the area code would be indicative of larger populations and so forth. Well, that's not quite so true now. So if I was talking about area codes earlier, back in the early 1900s versus today, then my when is going to indicate a significant difference in the relationships between what area codes have, what they mean. Where? New Mexico versus New York. If we're looking at, let's say, different temperature, we're looking and collecting information about weather patterns and things like that. Well, it's going to make a big difference whether I collected the data from Mexico or from New York. They're going to have different types of weather, especially with temperature. Okay, and here again, just to reemphasize, how was the data collected? Did someone go out and ask questions? Was it a survey? Did they conduct an experiment where variables were controlled and things like that? That's going to make a big difference. And when you look at this all together, what does the result of the study indicate? And here at the end, I've put the organization for you here. You can see exactly what it was. We saw some of those were purchase orders. You had names, where was it going to be shipped to, the price, the area code, any previous CD purchase, was it a gift or not, a number that corresponded to the product, and then the artist. So what we thought was possibly a topic or a location turned out to be an actual artist of a particular album, a CD. And so what we noticed is that our initial thoughts were incorrect. Even though Kansas is an actual location, in this particular setting, knowing the context changed the entire scenario. Right, so knowing context is super important when looking at data and trying to make some kind of conclusions about it. And here at the end, I've listed an assignment. You can download this document just below the video here. Make sure that you take a second, look over this. Here are the variables, and here are, I want you to ask about each one the W's. Who, what, when, where, why, and of course the how as well. How, this would be easy. It's simply collected from past data. So I went to a database. So this is essentially an observational study. I'll go ahead and throw that one out. Someone simply looked up the records of the Tour de France and wrote this down. So take a second, look at this information, and for each of the variables, I'd like you to classify who, what, when, where, why, how, or not how, and then I want you to talk about if it's categorical or quantitative. And if it is quantitative, go ahead and give me the units for these, and we'll talk about this later.